Welcome to the Renewable Watch Podcast, the front row seat towards really shaping India's renewable energy industry. I'm Mohammad Ali Siddiqui and I'm joined by my co host Sarthak Takia. In this podcast, we break down the trends in the industry, why they matter, and where things might be headed. The stakes are high, the timeline is tight, and the questions are only getting sharper. Few people in the energy space have worn as many hats as Dr. Palit has. With over 27 years of experience in the research on renewable energy, our guest today has built a bridge between grassroots implementation and global policy making. Dr. Palit has a PhD in energy policy from Terry School of Advanced Studies and is currently the head of the Center for Climate Change and Energy Transition at the Chintan Research Foundation. We're really happy to have you with us on the podcast today, sir.
Thank you, Ali, and thank you, Sarthak, for having me. And let me at the outset congratulate Renewable Watch for starting this initiative. I'm sure that this initiative will go a long way in expanding the knowledge base of renewables and other industry issues to your viewers.
Dr. Palit, if you can share with us, over the years, do you think the renewable mini grid market took off as expected? Or do you think it wasn't able to? And what were the key barriers that prevented it from that takeoff?
I think it's a very interesting question. There are two sides aspects of it. Let me give a little bit of very quickly a brief little bit of history about it, about the renewable energy in India. So probably renewable energy is the only technology that the Indian government, rightly or wrongly, took a decision to start from the extreme remote areas. So initially, all the renewable energy program, when the Department of Non-Conventional Energy Sources was started in 1982s, they started to focus in the extreme remote rural areas and implement different type of technologies. Now, in that context, mini grids were also started to be implemented. I think the first mini grid that was implemented in India, as far as my knowledge goes, is in 1992. At that time, Madhya Pradesh was undivided in a village in a Bilaspur district. And around the same time, in another village in the Sagar Island in West Bengal, a mini grid was implemented by West Bengal Renewable Energy Development Agency, of course, with support from the central department at the then department. Now it is called the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. These are working fine. The concept was that the mini grid where the grid cannot reach, we can set up mini grid to provide electrification to the local population, and these mini grids can be managed by the local population in their own way. So the government will provide subsidy, the capital cost subsidy to set up the mini grids, and the local population, they will form a committee and they will manage the mini grids. But the challenge, I think, one of the mistakes that we have done is that we felt that local community can manage the mini grid. Now, while it is theoretically, it looks good, and the local community can manage from the social aspects of running a mini grid, but I think they are not trained enough, or they may not have the skill to manage the technical things. And because these mini grids are being implemented in extreme remote areas, the moment the government left those villages and handed it over to the community, the community, after 1 year or 2 years, it runs very well. That means the solar panels, the batteries, everything runs very well for up to say 3 years or something like that. And you provide the mini grid to the villagers, assuming that they will only use two lights, a very small amount of electricity for their basic minimum consumption. But some villagers definitely have some little more money than others, so they will buy television, small, at that time, black and white TV or something else, maybe a small water pump to do some irrigation in their homestead garden, and to grow cash crops. Now that creates a lot of pressure on the battery, and the battery starts deteriorating or discharging more than the designed discharge. And when such things starts happening, it's very difficult to get some a technician or an engineer to those villages to get these things rectified. One, it is the challenge to get them. Two, who will pay the money? Because the government has already provided the capital cost, assuming that the villagers will take care of the systems themselves. So that created a lot of problem. And most of the initial mini grids, wherever it has been implemented, started to fail after the initial few years, unless the government continued to provide the backup support. For example, in Chhattisgarh, they didn't fail because the CREDA did a wonderful job of providing the backup support in terms of technical support. So that was one of the challenge that prevented. Then came the time when private sector started entering the sector, and we had a few projects being implemented in Bihar, in UP, in Jharkhand, and other states. And mini-grid was kept outside the purview of the electricity regulation as part of the 2003 Electricity Act. So if you're implementing mini-grids in the rural areas, then there is no need to take license or something, those things. But again, the capital cost is high, so the tariff remains to be high. So everybody was not able to take a mini grid connection, and the business models were not bankable. So the bank were not providing debt or loan to these mini grid companies to set up mini grids. So getting capital to set up mini grids for these private companies was very difficult. If they are getting capital, it was at a higher interest rate. So the tariff was further increased. So I think that created another problem. So non-bankable business model from a market perspective, I think, is another problem. And of course, one major problem in the policy aspect was the ambiguity in regulation and the constant narrative that mini grids are for remote areas, an alternative to grid rather than complementary to grid. So the government was running its large-scale village electrification program. They're electrifying right and left all villages. And for the community also, they were thinking that, okay, if I accept this mini grid, tomorrow the grid will not reach my village. And that created, so the ambiguity in the treatment of mini grid as a mainstream electrification process created an additional problem. So I think these are some of the challenges in the initial phase of the mini grid. There are, of course, many more challenges, but I am just highlighting three key challenges what I feel were instrumental or hindering the progress.
Yes, you rightly pointed out many challenges that actually these developers were facing. I also did some field trips to several of these solar mini grids in UP. And for most of them to be bankable, they were dependent on government subsidies or concessional finance from these donors. And they were eager to get more productive users of energy, be it food processing or now EV charging,
Right.
to make their project bankable. There was one observation that you also pointed out, and that raises a big question about the tariff and the cost of energy for these consumers. While in one glance you see that, okay, they're having an impact on the community, but the communities are also paying a very high price for maybe an application like phone charging or one bulb. But these communities also did not have a option at that time, and they were eager and willing to pay this high cost. So that puts a big question mark whether these projects were really having an impact or not. And for all these developers, as you said, the big elephant in the room was the national grid, and many were concerned about their future. So what can be done now to make the future of these renewable mini grid players brighter, and like what can be done so that this sector also starts growing, or do you think that the sector has no future going forward?
Well, there's a very interesting question about whether the sector has a future or not. My personal belief is that definitely the sector is a future, but the way we are implementing mini grids, probably we need to change the concept and the models upside down. So what I feel is that with technology is making all these things possible. So and the price, solar price has come down, the storage price are expected to come down further. So if and we did some study a few years back, and we found that uh, if we are implementing sub megawatt scale mini grids, say in the range of 1 megawatt, 800 kilowatt, 1.2 megawatt, something like that, covering a cluster of villages, then at least your economies of scale will be there, and your price will get reduced. So you can actually match the price of cost to supply to a household from the grid, which is about six to maybe around 5 to 8 rupees, something like that. You can actually provide electricity from mini grid at that price. Because the moment you set up a larger system, your bankability increases. Uh, because, and most importantly, you can also support productive use. What is currently happening, if you have a 50 kilowatt mini grid, you actually cannot support productive use. Because of paucity of time, I'm not describing why I'm saying that, but the fact is that there might be one or two productive use connected to the mini grid, and mostly it is the domestic load which are connected. You are unable to support the irrigation pump sets, and as part of my PhD, I conducted a very wide survey of important stakeholders. I reached out to almost more than 100 experts, trying to understand what are the drivers and barriers of mini grid implementation in India. And one of the things that very clearly came out, and I also gave scoring weight weights to each of this. That means I tried to calculate the not just what is important, but what is the strength of that driver or barrier. And I found that productive use was coming at the top. Everybody was considering, or most of the stakeholders are considering, productive use of electricity from mini grids would be the driving force behind the success of mini grids. But actually, most mini grids in India have been designed not for providing supply to productive use like irrigation. Right? At 50 kilowatt, you cannot actually drive productive use. So my hypothesis or proposition is that if we have a 500 kilowatt mini grid, then that problem gets resolved. Economies of scale happens, bankability increases, and you can achieve that. Now, this is the first as far as the rural area is concerned. I also feel that with more rooftop solar now being implemented under the PM Surya Ghar scheme and other schemes also. The PM Kusum scheme, solar irrigation being implemented under the PM Kusum schemes. All these rooftops subsequently will get connected in to form a mini grid at the local level, whether it is in urban area or rural area. And these mini grids can be interconnected with the main grid. So we'll have an interoperable grid mini grid system. We should not see mini grid as an isolated system uh, against the main grid or as a challenge to the main grid. Rather, my PhD thesis and also the way things are moving, and this is something that I've been saying since probably since 2010, that this grid and mini grid will have to be interconnected to complement each other, and that's the future. So it will also help in addressing your, or rather improving the resilience. Most of the European countries and US are actually implementing mini grids in grid. They have grid everywhere. So they are implementing mini grids in the form of energy islands, or to have more resilience in the face of storms and hurricanes and all those things that happen in US. Uh, so it will give you more reliability, more resilience. Uh, the grid will support it, and it can work very well. So, and with India announcing the India energy stack, I think that's the only logical way forward to have a complementary convergence of grid and mini grid.
That's an interesting idea for this segment to shift its focus from just rural communities to the urban sector as well. My counter question will be, so several discoms in states for CNI rooftops to prevent its high uptake. A lot of these discoms used to put and still put some restrictions, be it limits on net metering for rooftop projects and for open access charges to because they think they'll lose their high paying customers. So do you think the same will happen with these renewable mini grids in the urban areas? Will discoms be interested in their uptake or will they be more cautious?
Well, I think the new Electricity Act, the amendment that has been proposed, is also thinking on the similar line. Again, the discom will also have to change their business models. We cannot have a business model which was founded, say, before independence, right? Almost everywhere, these centralized business models were all from the early 1990s or mid 1990s. Taken from other countries like UK and US and other places. With advent of new technology, digitalization, we are also going at with decarbonization. So I give a 5D framework. It is decarbonization of the generation, digitalization of the transaction, decentralization of the services, then democratization of the grid. Now, the moment this rooftop solar brings in democratization of the grid, you have the deregulation automatically happening. So you start trading with your neighbor in a peer-to-peer trading model. And the discom will provide the infrastructure for this physical transfer of electrons from, say, from the seller to the buyer of energy. And the discom can start earning by providing its infrastructure, right? So they have to take that into account. So instead of competing in a competing mode, I think they have to innovate and have new models where they can utilize their infrastructure or monetize their infrastructure in a better way. At the same time, just like the trading takes place in a stock market, for every kilowatt hour of electricity that is traded using the infrastructure of this discom, you get a price for using the infrastructure, and two, for facilitating the infrastructure, you might also charge, say, a commission or something like that, that the regulator will decide, but something of that sort. So that's a new revenue model that you can create, right? So I think we have to think beyond the convention and start having new models. I'm sure that the discoms will earn more money than what they're earning now.
Do you think these new models will take off through market instruments, or will they need some kind of obligations and some incentives? There's talk about distributed renewable energy obligations as well. So are those needed, or the sector can take up without these obligations as well?
Well, I think, of course, I would prefer that the market takes off, but I think initially probably mandates might be required. We are still not in a position where market can take off on its own. So some sort of incentive, some sort of nudge probably will be required in the near future and before the market takes off, because it's an evolving stage. We are also learning. And most importantly, I think what is extremely important is the policy clarity. We tend to change policies quite often. So we have to give a direction or at least the intent that what we are planning to do, so that private sector, when they are investing into the business, they exactly know that, okay, from now till 10 years, this is what it is going to be. And then they can make their investment plan accordingly. If you change the policies midway, then it creates a lot of uncertainty. Or you bring in new policies midway, like additionality of something. So it creates a lot of uncertainty. For example, you have this renewable, and I think we had discussed earlier also about this. about the renewable purchase obligation, RPOs, for different technologies. So you have something for solar, you have something for wind, you have something for hydro, you have something for DRE, and so on and so forth. Right? It was introduced some time back. Uh, at the same time, CRC had a policy of fungibility of these RPOs. That means you have solar, which will, but for biomass, there is a multiplier. Now, whether we should follow the CRC policy or we should have followed the Ministry of Power policy, it was unclear. That means there was a lot of confusion. Right now, I think now it has been changed, and again, it is just renewable purchase obligation, and DRE. I think it has been kept separate, primarily because DRE has been considered as on a capacity basis. I think it has been considered. Uh, so I think frequent changes in policy creates a lot of problem. So we have to be little stable with our policy, and I think then the market can pick up.
Well, I would also like to perhaps shift the discussion towards schemes a bit. So PM Kusum scheme, as we know it, was pitched as to be a game changer for farmers because it could provide them an opportunity to combine decentralized solar with income opportunities at the same time, right? But we know based on several studies that in practice, there have been a lot of challenges around its implementation. There have been a lot of hurdles. And we were just now talking about policy making and clarity. Don't you think that something similar should apply here as well? And that there are actually, there's a big gap perhaps between ambition and the actual on the ground level implementation of such programs and schemes?
So I think the PM Kusum, as you might be aware of, there are three components. So the component where decentralized solar pumps are being implemented primarily to replace diesel pumps, I think that particular component has picked up well. We are having, I think the percentage of implementation is very high. That means it is progressing as per plan. I think the problem is with the first component A on putting up solar power plant in the wasteland that the farmer may have. Now, a farmer finds it difficult to raise the capital. There are issues related to whether you will get your revenue from the discom or not. So private sector is also not coming forward to say jointly implement the project with the farmer. So what might help, and I think the government is already thinking in that direction, and when they launched the PM Kusum 2, is about whether we can consider the first component, the component A, to be part of agrivoltaic and something like that. So the same land can be used for both generating solar power and also for agriculture. But the key challenge here is that we have not yet defined what is agrivoltaic for Indian condition. Now, in countries like Japan and Germany, they have some sort of definition for agrivoltaics in the sense that they have specified whether there will be some productivity loss for agriculture if you put solar in the agricultural field. Now they have defined what should be the maximum loss allowed. Now, in case of India, we have not yet identified the crops which can be grown as part of the agrivoltaic scheme. So I think both state and central government need to work together. The agricultural universities should tie up with universities which are offering energy programs and find a solution, try to identify the type of crops that can be grown in agrivoltaics and other things, and take this forward as part of PM Kusum 2. Probably the challenge for implementing the component A will get resolved. Component B is anyway getting implemented. Component C is about the solarization of the feeder. I think the government has also allowed, there are two components. Government has allowed both solarization of feeder, both directly by the discom, and also and I think that particular component has started to pick up. Maharashtra government has decided to solarize most of their feeder. I think other states are also following through. Um, so the challenge was with the first component. I think hopefully in the PM Kusum 2, they will redefine this program and start implementing. So the challenges are expected to get addressed. I'm a positive person, so I'm hoping that most of these challenges will get addressed.
What about the demand side challenges, perhaps? Raising of capital is something that you just mentioned
Yes.
at the start. So I remember in your research, you've explored the World Bank's pay-as-you-go model and how that has the potential to perhaps enable DRE across India based on experiences in Africa. But some critics would perhaps argue that this would be quite difficult in a place like India because a lot of people, a lot of the target audience would probably not have a credit history or
Mhm.
would not have the lending mechanism. And in an age where microfinance, they charge exorbitant
Yeah.
interest rates, uh, how do you see this aiding the whole concept of energy poverty as a whole? Because I believe you are one of the practitioners who also bridge community-wise development with renewable energy integration.
Again, I will say that we have to change the models. Now, I give an example why I'm saying it. So, our conventional self, let's take the example of we are discussing PM Kusum. So, let's take the example of an agriculture implement, and any type of agriculture implement or equipment that can be run on, say, solar or other renewable energy, distributed renewable energy. Now, these are big equipment, right? They have been designed to run on electricity from larger system uh, at different points of time. They have been designed. Now we are now talking about electricity from smaller system. Now, if you can design a system, say a power tiller or something like that, if you can design a system in a way that it consumes less electricity, is smaller in size, but produces the same output because of higher efficiency, then my consumption reduces, right?
Yeah.
So if my consumption reduces, my uh, capacity that is required, the solar capacity that is required to serve this system will get reduced. So my capital costs get reduced, my projects become bankable or viable, right? So we have to think from that perspective. I cannot use the same electric motor that I have been using, say for grinding. I have to design a better motor which consumes less electricity and can be connected with a solar plant, right? The moment it uses less electricity from a lower capacity system, my capital cost is reduced, the viability increases, the project is successful. So I think we have to think from that. So it is not just about if I have to connect with renewable energy systems, any of my productive use equipment. I think we also have to work not just in reducing or making the solar panels efficient, but also making the electric motors efficient. The systems produce more output with the same input, or at least the same output with lower input in the form of energy. So I think those are the type of thing we have to work. So there is a huge, I think, maybe a government policy, maybe more. We need to take it up with the IITs and technical institute. They are doing a lot of niche areas research, state of the art research, and in niche areas. But I think these are also some of the things that the this technical institutes should focus on. Some of the IITs have the Center for Rural Technology departments. They are doing it, but I think we need to scale it up because our demand is very high. So we really need to scale up the and produce more such equipments which can run on a DRE system.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting because we're also talking about policy making. Don't you think that given that electricity is a public good in India and it should be considered across the world, when it comes to policy making, however, our policy maker making assumes that the benefits of it all will go down to all sections of the population. And but as your research explores, some of our policy making, especially with regards to electrification and energy, has been gender blind, should I say? So, how would you say that we have historically, perhaps failed to account for this dimension, and how should future researchers and policymakers account for this?
I think the challenge here is that there is an inherent difference in baseline between men and women, and because we are talking of equality, so if we are providing the same input, so the output is bound to be different. So we have to now, if I see it again, just I'm trying to link it up with the last question about the productive use. Now we are talking about, say, a tractor, right? And the women's involvement or women's labor force participation in the agriculture sector. Now the big tractors probably it's so big that the women may not be able to manage it. Can we have a smaller tractor which can be easily managed by women but producing the same output? So such type of policies might be required.
Yeah.
Right. So we have to be we have to have gender responsive policies to have greater involvement of the of women in the different sectors. If we can do that, for example, let me give an example from Maharashtra. Maharashtra Discom, they introduced a policy to have, I think, 20% or something like that, if I remember the percentage correctly, 20 or something like that, female force participation across the various jobs that they have. So women line technician were recruited. Now, initially, it was difficult for the women line technician to climb the pole and do something, and they were feeling the social pressure was very high. They were not wearing the men's dress, and wearing a sari, they cannot climb the pole, right? But then gradually, behavioral change and they were nudged to, they were trained, they were given training, they were given behavioral training also. And now, the last time when I had a discussion with them, I think they had around 10 to 12% of female force participant, female line technician. So I think it can happen. You have to create a conducive ecosystem. One area where, for example, and a very classic example, now women were not getting involved in the field work in most of the electricity discom. You have women engineers also now being recruited. So they were not getting into field work. They were mostly sitting in the office and doing the office job, right? Not going to the field because it is difficult to get a toilet in the villages. Now that problem has been solved by the government. You have toilet now in every houses, right? Or if I say, if not every, at least most of the houses have the toilet, right? Now, in that case, now if a female, say, if a women technician or an engineer is given a position at a field position, they won't find it difficult. At least this challenge is addressed, right? They have to be in the field for the full day, and they won't find problem with this. So I think it is very important that conducive social sector or sister policies also have to be worked out, because each one impacts the other. Only energy sector policies, changing the energy sector policies may not yield results in this. For example, this particular gender thing, we have to have other sister policies also which might need change. And collectively, definitely, it will have a positive impact.
Also, coming back to the renewable mini grid market, like to know about your outlook, because when we talk to a lot of these developers, they're now shifting their focus to African countries as well. And a lot of these players now have MOUs with countries and have a long pipeline of projects. So what do you make of this trend, and why are they moving towards Africa?
I think that's a good choice by the developer for the simple reason that Africa, large population in Africa is not having electricity access. I think around more than 500 million people in Africa, they don't have electricity access. It's a huge market, and it's the right time for us to reach out to those African countries and explore this situation. One, we are in a good position to take the Indian models because we were also facing a similar situation in the 70s and 80s. Uh, we have passed that situation, so we know exactly what Africa want, what type of model would be feasible there, what type of pricing mechanism will be good for them, or or I would say what type of tariff will be suitable for them and they can pay. So taking Indian experiences to Africa, both technologically and also institutionally, I think it's the right time to do that and help the African countries to enhance their energy supply. The good thing, or I would is about Africa is that the only challenge that we have in Africa is about the money supply, whether the states have enough money to fund a government program or not. In India, Indian government was spent a huge amount of money, more than 80,000 crores to provide electricity supply, connecting all villages, then all households, strengthening the distribution sector. So that's a huge amount of money. So whether that type of money is there with the African government or not, I don't know. But in Africa, the fuel supply is not subsidized, as far as I know, in the countries that I have visited. So they are anyway spending a lot of money every week or every month to get some sort of electricity. They're using dry cell batteries to get say lighting, and it costs them very high. So definitely a solar mini grid is a viable option vis-a-vis a dry cell battery. It will not just a viable option, it gives you a better quality of light. So companies which are implementing mini grids or say rooftop solar systems or selling solar products, I think Africa is a good market to explore, and it's also an opportunity for India to strengthen the India-Africa partnership. We have not done so earlier. I think we missed the opportunity at that time in the 2010 and around that time. But now that we are doing, and the government should also support that. My take here is that, well, instead of these companies competing with each other in the African market, the government should sit together with these companies and decide that, okay, take out 5 countries, you do your business in these 5 countries, you do your business in another 5 countries, so that at least within the Indian companies there are no competition, right? They're in a better position to compete with companies from other countries instead of competing with each other.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Palit, for coming on our show. It was great having you. You are one of the, probably people in the energy space that we've been wanting to interview with for a long time, especially considering the range of portfolios that you have worked across. So it was nice having you over and listening to your insights.
Thank you so much.
Hope you had a time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so
much,
much. Thank
Dr.
you, Adi.
Palit.
Thank you, Sarthak. Thank you.